Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Paul Pham and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking about my first failed project that ended up costing my company a lot of money. People tend to hear about all the successful things that people have done through social media like LinkedIn, YouTube, and all that good stuff. But today I want to break that meta and kind of share the opposite side about projects failing and how you can recover from that, and ultimately how can you move forward with that. All right, let's hop right into it. So on this particular project, I joined as the engineering manager, trying to deliver this project successfully. When I first joined, the people who were running this account, specifically the directors and VPs, were telling me that this project has been running for about 1.5 years so far, and they wanted it to be delivered within the next 4 months. What they told me later on was that this project has been behind schedule for 3 months already. So those are some of the context information. And when I first joined, I was filling in for a previous engineering manager who have left for a different opportunity. So there weren't a lot of knowledge transfers that were taking place, unfortunately. And so I kind of joined in blindly and had about a week and a half to ramp up on the project, learn about the technology stack, get to know my team members, and ultimately deliver the project in 4 months. The gist of this project essentially was trying to rebuild a platform that users can log into and have conversations with end users. So you can think of it as online messaging. In addition to that, for this particular project, we worked with React, Node.js, MongoDB, Salesforce, and Twilio to create this online messaging platform. When I first joined the project, I wanted to spend the first week and a half trying to understand the technology, get into the code base, read the code, read any documentation available, because coming from a tech consultant background, as tech consultants, you only have like a week to ramp up on a project and start delivering work for your client. And so I tried to use the same mindset from my consulting background into this particular project. And ultimately it helped a little bit because I was able to understand some of the code base, some of the systems, as well as get to know my team members. On this particular project, I was leading a team of about 10 people and collaborating with product managers as well as some of our end users to deliver the product. However, as I went through the project on the second week, I realized how complicated the code base was and how rigid the system was. There were a lot of different microservices interacting with one another, and so I had to ask a lot of different questions. And after finding out that the project has been behind for 3 months, it added a lot of pressure to me to be able to deliver things. So what I did next was essentially talk to the product manager to kind of understand where we're at and what we need to do. Thankfully, the product manager was able to break down some of the work that we had remaining and what troubles we had. After doing that, I went on to like the daily operations. How did the team work? Were they utilizing refinement sessions? They understand the stories that were being created, and I realized that we didn't really have those processes set up. It was more of a Kanban style, and it was hard to understand how quickly we can deliver things like that, given that we have limited amount of time. So next up I started doing was creating processes like making sure we have stand-up every day, having sprint planning, also creating refinement sessions. So pretty much following a Scrum methodology so that we can better understand how much work we can deliver within 2 weeks for a sprint and how many sprints we need in order to deliver this work. Ultimately giving me that sense of estimation that I needed to deliver and communicate to the rest of the stakeholders and the leadership team. Probably right now you might be wondering, Paul, this sounds super great and all, like this sounds like a typical software engineering project. You're following Scrum, you're trying to go with best practices, you're cutting scope. So what went wrong? And great question if you were thinking that. The problem where we went wrong was that when we were implementing this, we were having a lot of technical debt. Essentially like, okay, well, let's just implement this now because we're in a time crunch and we'll worry about this later. And so essentially, if you didn't know, when you're integrating a lot of different subsystems like Twilio to Salesforce to all these things, there are best practices that you should follow. And one of them was actually making sure you understand your API limits. What I mean by this is that each time you call a specific API, you need to know how many times you can call it within a minute, within seconds. We didn't take this into consideration, and we were building our system in a way where we were calling APIs multiple times per second, like in the hundreds to 200s APIs per second. And this kind of overloaded our system, unfortunately. When we were developing these features locally, we were only working with 2 to 3 concurrent users at a given time. We weren't taking into consideration of scalability, and that's the part where we kind of messed up. And so when we developed it, it passed development. We went to QA, and QA tested it with 2 or 3 users as well. And so we didn't really catch that. And when we actually deployed it and went live, systems were slowing down. People were experiencing issues and bugs and errors where they couldn't see particular data. And so we were called in and they were like, why can't we see this? This is affecting the work that we're doing right now and causing us issues. So we can't deliver the right quality to our end users. And at that moment, I was like, I don't know what's going on. Let's roll this feature back and investigate this tomorrow. So the following day, after that issue occurred, my team and I hopped on a call and started mob programming. If you don't know what mob programming is, essentially just prioritizing everyone's work within the team and putting our brains together to figure out the root cause analysis of a problem. Ultimately doing a team programming session. So you typically have pair programming, but now this is mob programming, just essentially everyone trying to figure it out. And so we spent about 6 hours on a call together trying to figure out what happened, like why wasn't this working? And so we were investigating, was it on the Salesforce side? Was it on the Twilio side? Was it on our React side? One of my engineers suggested maybe we should all hop on 3 different users so that we can see and replicate the issue. After doing that, we realized, hey, we're finally seeing the problem and reproducing it. And that made me so happy, but at the same time made me sad because why didn't we think about this earlier on when we were developing, when we were doing QA, when we were UAT? UAT stands for user acceptance testing, and ultimately doing more testing to make sure that our product can scale. After finding this out, we started to figure out our API sequence and how many APIs we were calling, and ultimately realized that we were calling about 200 APIs per second, which overpasses the recommended and limit of the API calls, and anything after that will essentially break. And so because of that, we had to restructure our particular feature so that we were under the 100 API limit. And after deploying that again, we went live the next day. Unfortunately, the next day we ran into a very similar problem with API limits, but on a different feature. After this, a lot of our stakeholders and a lot of senior leadership realized that why are there so many riddled with bugs and things like that. So what I decided next was, sit down with my team, create a contingency plan where let's try to understand all of our scalability issues, document all of our APIs for the next 2 days, and then fix anything that we need to fix to make sure this can go live again. We shared this out with our stakeholders and leadership, saying that, look, we're gonna try to go one last time to go live. And if that doesn't work out and we have to roll back, then let's just scrap this project altogether so that, we can focus on other priorities. Because at the end of the day, referring back to sunk cost fallacy, if we keep on investing something like this where initially the infrastructure is not built out correctly, just wasting money essentially. And so as a result of this, my team worked really, really, really hard, and something that I am super appreciative about. But at the end of the day, in 2 days when we went live again, we were just having other issues pop up here and there. And I ultimately decided to call that this project was not going to be delivered successfully. So met up with the senior leaders, met up with the stakeholders, and told them, hey, look, let's just put a pause on this. So after doing all that, it was super unfortunate. I was like super bummed out, I was hoping to deliver my first project on this new company, but it ended up being a total mess. Thankfully, my team was super supportive about everything going on, and we had a really good 2-hour retrospective meeting. Because of that, we were able to move forward together as a team to our next project, in which we delivered successfully. Looking back on it, what could have been better? Number 1 would be, think about the ilities when creating projects. When I say ilities, I refer to the ilities framework like scalability, usability, maintainability, accessibility, reliability. All those capabilities, essentially. The reason that this main project failed was due to scalability issues where we weren't taking into consideration about the API limits and all that good stuff. Number two, I would say make sure when you're building something, ensure that you have all the testing frameworks set up properly. Not just having unit tests, but making sure you have manual testing, making sure you have regression testing, and ultimately load testing, or also known as stress testing. When I say this is that, sure, it can work for 5 users. How about let's implement a testing framework that you can test out for 1,000 users? How about 5,000 users at a given moment? Would your system be able to scale up to that? That way you can figure out sooner than later what you need to do and change before actually going live and do live production testing. And last but not least is making sure you know all the requirements before hopping onto the project. So what I mean by this is that when I first joined this project, I already knew this project was behind schedule for 3 months, but I was naive. I was unprepared to tackle this particular project, didn't really know the code base too well, and committed to a 4-month delivery date without knowing all these unknowns and complexities. In my future projects, what I made sure to do was gather all the product requirements, gather all the unknowns, make sure I note all the assumptions, make sure I included my team within all the estimation work, specifically the high-level estimates. Is this epic doable within a 2-month span? Do we need more time? Thankfully, after this project, I wasn't fired, but learned a super valuable lesson that I will take with me to all my future projects. And hopefully, after watching this video, you can actually take some of these lessons that I've just shared so that you don't make the same mistakes that I've made and ended up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And with that said, this concludes my video. Hopefully you liked the video, and please remember to comment down below if you have any questions. Other than that, subscribe and like the video, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.